A freighter carrying a crew of 29 disappeared on Lake Superior during a severe storm last night, and so far, no survivors have been found. The freighter, the Edmund Fitzgerald, was transporting iron ore when it ran into high winds and 25-foot waves.
Swimmers will try to do what the Edmund Fitzgerald could not, to mark 50 years since the deadly shipwreck on Lake Superior. Next summer, 68 people will swim the ship's unfinished 411-mile route. It's about 6 miles per person.
The name Edmund Fitzgerald has echoed across the Great Lakes like a ghost story for 50 years. On a freezing November night in 1975, everything changed. No distress call, no survivors, just 29 men lost to the dark, and a mystery that has haunted generations ever since. Once celebrated as the pride of American shipping, she was a steel giant many believed could never sink. Now, decades later, technology has finally returned to the place where she rests.
It's 40 years since the famous storm that sank the ore carrier, the Edmund Fitzgerald. The wreck happened just north of Whitefish Point in Lake Superior on November 10, 1975.
Using powerful underwater drones, a research team dared to explore the wreck in detail. Down in the silent depths, what they found stunned everyone watching. But what did the cameras really capture inside the wreck? And why are investigators still struggling to explain it? Let's find out. The Queen of the Great Lakes sets sail. The Edmund Fitzgerald wasn't just another freighter. She was a floating marvel. Painted in deep red, with a gleaming white deck above, she stood out against the water like a moving monument. At 729 feet long, she was the largest ship ever seen on the Great Lakes, and from the moment she was built, people couldn't stop talking about her. In 1958, when she first entered the water at River Rouge, Michigan, the launch turned into a celebration. Crowds lined the riverbanks, waving and cheering as her horn echoed across the air. Families snapped photos, children pointed, and the giant vessel glided forward with power and grace. Newspapers soon crowned her the Queen of the Great Lakes, while sailors affectionately called her the pride of the American side. She didn't just carry iron ore, she carried pride, hope, and admiration everywhere she went. Her purpose was simple, but vital: to transport thousands of tons of iron ore from the mines near Duluth, Minnesota, to the steel factories of Detroit and Toledo. But the Fitzgerald did it differently. She wasn't just efficient, she was elegant, cutting through wind and wave with the smoothness of a vessel built for greatness. Wherever she appeared, people paused to watch. The men who served aboard her knew they were part of something special. Many of them stayed for years, loyal to her decks and the rhythm of her long journeys across the lakes. Life aboard the Fitzgerald was hard but proud, guided by a captain whose calm leadership inspired confidence, Ernest McSorley. Known across the Great Lakes for his steady hand and composed nature, McSorley was the kind of man others trusted when the weather turned against them. For 17 years, the Edmund Fitzgerald lived up to every name and every headline. She braved storms, fog, and freezing winds without fail, carrying her cargo across the lakes like clockwork. To the crew, she was more than steel and machinery. She was home.
The freighter, the Edmund Fitzgerald, was transporting iron ore when it ran into high winds and 25-foot waves. Rebecca Bell has the story.
And to those who watched her from the shore, she was strength, pride, and a reminder of the greatness built on American waters. For nearly 2 decades, the Edmund Fitzgerald ruled the Great Lakes like no other ship. More than 700 voyages came and went without a single major incident. Her reputation was spotless. No accidents, no lost crew, not even a close call. To sailors, she felt untouchable, the kind of ship that could weather anything. And like so many legends before her, people began whispering that dangerous word, unsinkable. But history never shows mercy to ships given that title. On November 9, 1975, the Fitzgerald departed from Superior, Wisconsin, carrying over 26,000 tons of iron ore bound for Detroit. Behind her sailed the freighter Arthur M. Anderson, following the same route across Lake Superior. The weather forecast warned of rough conditions, but nothing unusual for that time of year. Or so they thought. By dawn the next day, the lake had turned into a roaring monster. Winds howled at more than 70 miles per hour, and waves rose higher than houses, pounding the steel hull with every crash. Blinding snow and freezing rain made it nearly impossible to see. Ice clung to every surface, weighing the ship down even more. At 3:30 p.m., Captain Ernest McSorley radioed the Anderson with an update. His voice was calm but strained. The Fitzgerald had taken on a bad list, lost part of its equipment, and one of the hatch covers was leaking. Still, the captain kept his composure, promising to ride out the storm, as he had done many times before. But Lake Superior had other plans. As night fell, the winds grew stronger and the waves became crueler. At 7:10 p.m., McSorley sent one final message: "We are holding our own." Moments later, radar contact vanished. The Fitzgerald was gone. No emergency call, no flare in the dark, just silence. A legend, lost beneath the waves. When searchers finally reached the area, the truth was devastating.
An air and sea search is continuing for possible survivors of the Edmund Fitzgerald, a 729-foot ore carrier, which apparently broke apart and sunk last night on Lake Superior.
The massive freighter had split in two beneath the waves. The bow rested upright in the mud like a gravestone, while the stern lay twisted and upside down not far away. All 29 men on board had vanished with her. Not a single body was ever recovered. Investigations followed, but answers were scarce. The Coast Guard concluded in 1977 that flooding from unsecured hatch covers might have caused the sinking. But families and fellow sailors rejected the claim, insisting that McSorley and his crew were too experienced to make such a mistake. The National Transportation Safety Board later proposed a different cause: a structural failure. The ship, they said, might have cracked apart on the surface, overwhelmed by the force of the waves before it even sank. Others suggested that the Fitzgerald may have struck an unseen shoal, tearing open her bottom in the blinding snow. And some whispered about rogue waves, walls of water rising over 30 feet high, that may have slammed her without warning, one after another, until even she could no longer survive. Nearly 50 years later, the Edmund Fitzgerald still lies deep below Lake Superior's icy waters, silent, broken, and mysterious. To this day, no one truly knows what happened in those final moments. The lake remembers everything, even what it refuses to reveal. It's been nearly 50 years since the Edmund Fitzgerald vanished beneath the icy waters of Lake Superior, and yet the silence still feels alive. For generations, people have searched for answers, building theories and legends around what happened that dark November night. Some believed it was the storm. Others thought the ship struck an unseen shoal or split apart without warning. But every explanation left one thing missing: proof. With time, the story blurred between fact and myth. Songs were written, memories faded, and the Fitzgerald became less of a wreck and more of a ghost story whispered across the Great Lakes. That silence lasted until 2025. A new research team arrived at Lake Superior with cutting-edge underwater drones capable of exploring areas no diver could reach.
Mixter traveled 530 feet to the bottom to investigate.
We took a two-person submersible called the Delta,
the Great Lakes' most famous graveyard.
As the drone slipped beneath the calm surface, all noise on the research vessel faded. The water swallowed the machine, sealing itself like glass. What had been calm moments earlier suddenly felt heavy, almost alive. Down in the darkness, the drone's lights cut through the black water. Tiny white specks drifted past the camera like snow in slow motion. Small fish appeared and disappeared again, swallowed by shadows. Then, without warning, something enormous began to emerge from the gloom. It was the Edmund Fitzgerald. Her bow rose out of the sediment like a giant asleep in the deep. Rusted but still powerful, her shape was instantly recognizable. The drone's light traced her long, corroded hull where decades of silt had settled like dust on an ancient monument. The deeper the camera moved, the more she resembled something sacred, a steel cathedral resting in eternal silence. Every plate, every dent, every seam was captured in remarkable clarity. The team watched in awe as the drone glided slowly along the wreck. The water around her felt still, as if even the lake itself was holding its breath. But the calm shifted when the drone reached the ship's cargo hatches. On the surface, one of the engineers leaned toward her monitor and whispered, "Zoom in." The pilot obeyed, guiding the lights closer to the hatch fastenings. That's when they saw it. One of the clamps that sealed the hatches was missing entirely. Another had been bent backward, warped like metal forced past its breaking point. Several more were twisted and crushed. These weren't ordinary fittings. They were the locks that held the cargo doors tight, keeping out the freezing lake water that could flood the ship in seconds. Each of the Fitzgerald's 21 hatches had 22 clamps, more than 460 in total. The ship's final defense against disaster. And yet, here they were, broken and deformed, as if torn apart by some violent force no one had ever seen. For years, people had searched for answers. But now, seeing the damage up close, the mystery only deepened. What really destroyed those clamps that night? And could this be the clue that finally reveals what brought down the pride of the Great Lakes? The secrets the lake refused to keep. As the underwater drone drifted deeper into the wreck, every image on the screen told a story of destruction. The research team watched closely, their voices fading to whispers. At first, they saw small details, clamps that were bent and out of place, steel plates that looked like they had been twisted by an invisible hand. It was clear that whatever tore through the Edmund Fitzgerald that night had been powerful enough to bend solid metal like paper. Then, the drone's light caught something strange. Near the center of the ship's deck, a vent pipe was gone. It wasn't rusted off or buried under silt. It had been ripped away completely. In its place was a torn opening in the steel, roughly the width of a man's hand. The hole led straight into the cargo hold, a place that should have been sealed tight against the storm. The room above fell completely silent. Everyone watching the monitors understood what they were seeing. This gap wasn't a small detail. It was a direct path for the freezing lake water to rush into the ship's core. For decades, experts had believed the Fitzgerald might have been damaged by waves or structural weakness. But now, seeing this hole changed everything. It suggested that as the storm grew worse, water might have been pouring straight into the ship without anyone realizing how much danger they were in. Using new scans and data from the dive, the researchers created a digital model of the ship and ran new tests. What they discovered was alarming. Each time a massive wave slammed over the bow, thousands of gallons of water could have flooded the forward cargo area, more than enough to weigh the ship down in minutes. The team estimated that water might have been entering at a rate close to 4,000 gallons per minute, about the size of a full swimming pool pouring in again and again. But on board that night, the crew probably didn't know what was happening below. The Fitzgerald was still moving, her engines still roaring through the storm. From the bridge, it might have felt like they were managing, staying ahead of the waves. What they couldn't see was that the storm was already inside the ship. Hidden beneath the deck, water was filling the forward compartments faster than the pumps could handle. Every crash of the waves only made it worse, slowly stealing the ship's strength from within. When the research team replayed the drone footage, it became painfully clear that the crew's calm during their final moments wasn't overconfidence. It was unawareness. They likely believed they were surviving the storm, not realizing the battle had already been lost below their feet. Deep beneath the storm's fury, a silent disaster was already unfolding inside the Edmund Fitzgerald. While her engines roared and the crew pushed forward through the blinding snow, the lower decks told a very different story, one hidden from every man on board. Water had begun to seep in, quietly at first, but steadily enough to change everything. The great ship that had once been the pride of the lakes was slowly becoming heavier at the front, her bow sinking deeper with every crashing wave. From above, she still looked strong, charging through the storm like she always had. But inside, the balance had already shifted. Each new wave slammed over the deck, forcing more water through the loosened clamps and damaged vents. The ship was not just fighting the weather, she was fighting herself. With every ton of water that poured in, her front grew heavier, her back rose higher, and the steel body that once flexed with strength began to twist under unbearable strain. For a few moments, the Fitzgerald still seemed alive. The engines running, lights flickering through the mist, her crew believing they could hold their course until the storm eased. But the truth was far worse. Beneath their feet, the forward holds were turning into giant tanks of water, each wave filling them faster than the pumps could empty. Then, in one violent motion, everything reached its limit. The bow, dragged down by its impossible weight, plunged beneath the freezing surface. The stern, still buoyant and trying to rise, jerked upward sharply. Within seconds, the ship's backbone bent beyond repair. The enormous freighter split apart, one half sinking fast into the darkness, the other tumbling behind. There was no time to send a call, no flare fired into the night sky. The end came so quickly that silence became the only witness. To most people, a broken clamp or a missing vent might sound like a small, fixable issue, nothing that could bring down such a massive vessel. But to marine engineers, those details are the thin line between safety and disaster. Every clamp, bolt, and seal on a cargo hatch has one job: to keep the freezing water of Lake Superior out. When even a few of them fail, that line is gone, and so is any hope of survival. The footage from the underwater drone showed the harsh truth. Many of those clamps weren't just rusted or worn, they were gone. Some were twisted like metal ribbons, others bent in opposite directions, and several hatch covers appeared loose or warped. This wasn't the sudden failure of a perfect ship. It was the slow breakdown of a vessel that had endured too much. Years of heavy service, harsh winters, and endless stress on her hull had weakened her without anyone realizing how badly. Those small hidden wounds, the ones buried under paint and steel, finally gave way when the worst storm in decades arrived. The result was inevitable. For experts studying the wreck today, that realization hit hard. The Edmund Fitzgerald wasn't sunk by mystery, bad luck, or some legend of the lake. She was undone by the very forces she had conquered for nearly 2 decades. Her strength, once her pride, had quietly turned fragile with time. The storm didn't destroy her all at once. It simply revealed the damage that had been waiting beneath the surface. And when nature tested her one final time, the Fitzgerald answered not with resistance, but with silence. When researchers studied the new underwater footage frame by frame, they weren't just examining a wreck, they were reading a final message written in metal. Every twisted beam and missing clamp told the story the crew never had time to explain. The scans revealed something unexpected. The damage pattern matched what would happen if the ship had broken apart while still above the surface, not deep below it. That meant the Edmund Fitzgerald likely split in 2 before ever reaching the lake floor. One half sank almost instantly, while the other flipped and spiraled downward until it hit the bottom with incredible force. It all happened so fast that no one on board could have reacted in time. To test this theory, experts ran digital models using the drone's data. The results were chilling. During her final moments, the ship might have been taking in over 4,000 gallons of water every minute, like an entire swimming pool flooding her holds in just a few minutes. Yet the crew likely had no idea. From the bridge, everything still looked under control. The lights were on, the engines roared, and they thought they were holding steady. But beneath them, the flooding had already sealed their fate. The ship was sinking from within. When she vanished from radar, the nearby freighter Arthur M. Anderson tried calling again and again, only to hear static and wind. No distress call, no warning. The Fitzgerald was simply gone. Search teams arrived soon after, but what they found told the whole story. Lifeboats shattered and unused, floating in the freezing waves. Whatever happened, it was instant. Sonar later showed that both halves of the Fitzgerald rested close together on the lakebed, meaning she sank almost vertically, her bow going first, the stern following moments later. For decades, people blamed rogue waves or crew error, but modern technology has painted a clearer picture. The ship wasn't undone by mystery. She was undone by time. Years of stress, repairs, and unnoticed wear had weakened her steel. When the perfect storm struck, those silent cracks gave way. Experts now believe the Edmund Fitzgerald didn't just sink, she was pushed beyond her limit. Even the strongest design can fail when nature finds the smallest flaw. Nearly 50 years later, her story still echoes across Lake Superior. Each November, bells toll in remembrance of the 29 men who never made it home. Their ship may rest in silence, but her story endures. A haunting reminder of human courage, fragile strength, and the unforgiving power of the sea. As the cold waters of Lake Superior continue to guard the Edmund Fitzgerald's resting place, her story reminds us how fragile even the strongest creations can be, and how courage endures long after the storm. If this story moved you, share what you think might have really happened that night. Somewhere beneath those dark waves, countless other stories are still waiting for the day we uncover them together. And maybe one day, we will.